Norbert, you're a politician to the other part of the French-German couple here. Over to you, please.
Okay. Yes, good morning, everybody. What next in and for Europe is the question. Before I try to elaborate a little bit on this question, just let me perhaps briefly summarize where we are, and from that point we can ask, how will it go on? I think where we are is a point and situation we have not seen since World War II. There have not been so many crises at the same time from abroad and internally in Europe and confronting Europe. Externally, we have a fundamental new posturing of Russia, as everybody knows. This has shattered the European peace order we considered to be eternal after the coming down of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain. Everybody thought and considered this European peace order to be the consequence, the historic consequence of the bloodshed of the 20th century, and we were absolutely sure, not that Russia is a democracy like the Western European style of kind of democracy, but that Russia was absolutely determined to remain a part of that political order, and we had to see that Russia violated not only a border. It's not only about Ukraine, but it is about the persistence of the peace order in Europe, what we are dealing with Russia when we talk about Ukraine. And then we have seen the increased turmoil, the territorial extension of the conflicts from Northern Africa over the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, to Afghanistan, and an increase of complexity, which also seems to be persistent. It's not going away anytime soon. And we see a mixture between the Russian posture in Europe and the military encroachment and activity in Syria by waging a war and committing war crimes. And what we see as Europeans for the first time, of course, the geography has not changed, but the politics have changed. What we see is a fundamentally new quality of mobility of crises. The consequences, the crises now are spilling over to Europe, and we can't say any longer we have domestic politics and policies which can be separated from foreign policy crises. They are there, they always have been there, but they are far away. No, they are not any longer far away, but they are coming and entering Europe and having a huge impact on the stability of our societies. So problems which emerge to be and evolve to be foreign policy problems have roots in social, societal problems within foreign countries, spilling over to Europe as foreign policy problems and affecting the stability of our societies. So we have not any longer the separation between foreign policy and domestic policy, but we do not also have any longer only interstate problems, but we have a mixture of social and foreign policy problems. And now, and then I will of course end with that description of the external challenges. We have a new president-elect in the United States, and for the first time, perhaps in the history of American foreign policy, at least for the last 100 years, nobody in the world knows what foreign policy can we expect. At least nobody knows it. There have been some comments on foreign policy, but I think that they were not so much comments on foreign policy, but they were addressed exclusively to the domestic voter, and Trump did not care so much about that. There were perhaps some foreign listeners when he talked about NATO and so on. So we have now, even coming from the United States, a new portion, a new quality of insecurity which the United States now injects to the global insecurity we have. At this time, at this critical juncture of foreign policy surrounding Europe, we have unfortunately to state that Europe internally is in the worst shape since the Roman treaties. And it is the worst shape because it's not as it was and has been in the past, that you have a crisis, a challenge, and then you adapt. And after all, Europe emerged to be stronger than when we entered the crisis. It is a crisis of mentality, perhaps of political culture. It is the re-emergence of state egotism and partly nationalism not seen in the decades before, which fundamentally weakens us. So this may be perhaps an insufficient description of where we are. So how to respond to that? Of course, it is so complex and complicated, it's not easily to be answered, but a few elements of how to proceed in the interests of Europe and the West may be said. My first assumption is that in this ever deeper globalizing world without developing an international order, perhaps international order even in retreat, the West as a political concept is indispensable. Either we persist to assert a Western concept of politics, which consists of fundamental principles and values, like the rule of law, like the dignity of man, like democracy. Either these values are asserted by the West, or these minority values of the minority population, the West, will diminish and will not be asserted and remain strong. So the West is indispensable. Secondly, when it comes to a possible retreat and perhaps a new isolationism of the United States, I do not predict, because I remain to my point, we do not know what the American foreign policy is about. But America First sounds a little bit like that, but I don't know. I don't assert to know anything about the future course. In any case, what happens, the United States is irreplaceable for the West. Some say, yes, the United States might backtrack, then we have to come in as Europeans. Given the political, economic, technological, military power of the United States, there is no substitute for the United States within the concept of the West. Thirdly, if we want to activate the West, preserve the West, the EU as one pillar, the second pillar in this concept, is insufficient, particularly on foreign policy. We have to evolve as an actor on foreign and security policy, because even if Hillary Clinton had been elected as president of the United States, she would have been forced to focus on domestic challenges, on creating jobs, on bridging the societal and social gap in the society. And so any current and future president will have to work on a very much domestic agenda. So in our national interest as European nation states, we have to do more, and we have to accept and face the reality that we are not any longer living in the Cold War, where we had the security umbrella of the United States, but we have to do more for our own security. And my last remark is, in order to enable us to do that, to overcome our internal dividing differences is pivotal and a prerequisite that we get able to forge a kind of a common foreign policy on the European level. What do I mean with that? I think we have three dividing issues in Europe: the refugees, the economy, austerity, and Russia. And as a German politician, I want to make clear that I see that Germany, with regard to these three issues, has to shift from a partisan participant in the struggles into a new position as a provider for solution. We do not strive for the leading role. We haven't strived for that, and it's not something we want to have, and I would not assume it to be a healthy situation. But we have a political weight we can't ignore, and we have to put in this weight for solution. We have to increase the legitimacy of result. This is a prerequisite for our overarching goal to unify Europe, to make Europe work again in order to develop a European voice in the field of foreign policy to serve our own fundamental interests.